Hello, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I'm Daniel, and I'm a product manager for Manage Engine. This is the agenda for our webinar today. We are going to take a look at what is a hybrid workplace, why you should be adapting your service desk to the hybrid workplace, 5 tips to help you adapt your service desk, and how to leverage analytics to adapt to to adapt to the hybrid workplace. Now, what is a hybrid workplace? A hybrid workplace is where employees can choose to come to the office or work from home based on their needs. They can choose to do both during the work week or be primarily remote or an office going employee. A hybrid workplace offers flexibility for the employees to choose their mode of work. A lot of companies are considering some form of the hybrid work model. Now, during the pandemic, with everyone forced to be at home, employees and companies realized the value of remote work. Companies can cut expenses by having fewer people work from the office, while employees that work from home cut down on commute and fuel expenses. They also get to spend more time with their families or use it to pursue hobbies. However, a completely remote work model has its challenges as well. We all know how hard it is to be cooped up inside your home with no other choices. Not just that, the blurring lines between work and home, the increased feeling of burnout and loneliness are the reasons that many companies are considering mixing both the remote work model and the in office model to create a sort of a hybrid model that works for them and their employees. According to Microsoft's 2021 Work Trend Index, around 66% of leaders say that their company is considering redesigning office space for hybrid work. With hybrid workspaces starting to become the norm, we need to understand how this affects IT service delivery and the service desk. Now, why should you adapt your service desk to the hybrid model? The hybrid workplace poses unique challenges for IT teams. Trends that started much before the pandemic have been accelerated by it. Trends like the adoption of cloud infrastructure and securing your network using measures like zero trust will continue to gain momentum as IT departments get used to working in this new hybrid future. The hybrid workplace requires IT teams to juggle workers across work modes, geographies, and time zones. They have to ensure business is conducted smoothly, manage and empower workers to do their jobs, and secure the organization's virtual resources and assets from external attack. Keeping this rapidly evolving landscape in mind, here are 5 tips that you can use to get your service desk ready for the hybrid workplace. We'll be seeing how you can create an inclusive IT practice for the hybrid workplace, secure your organization with zero trust concepts, get your infrastructure prepared for increased cloud adoption, begin shifting your IT spending to align with the hybrid workplace, and also incorporate continuous improvement in your service delivery. Let's get started. With the onset of the pandemic, the majority of the office going population was restricted to working from home. While this was a boon to employees, IT teams have been running ragged to figure out how to smoothly transition a primarily in office workforce into a primarily remote workforce. One of the ways that IT teams performed this transition was to change the previously in person processes into digital ones. For instance, with everyone working remotely, you couldn't just walk up to your IT technician if an application isn't working right. The technician has to schedule a session with you where they take remote control of your device to fix your issues. With employees coming back to work, it is very tempting to let go of these new digital processes in favor of the old in person ones. However, IT teams must remember that not all employees are coming back. There are going to be fully remote employees, partly remote employees, and employees who come in daily. A truly hybrid workplace will offer the flexibility for employees to switch between these work modes as well. This means there is a need to adopt processes and practices that are inclusive of all these modes of work. The IT team's prerogative is to maintain consistent, high quality service for all employees across work modes and geographies. Adapt existing IT practices into practices that are equally accessible for a fully remote employee and an employee who comes into the office daily. Here are 3 practices that can help you create a more inclusive hybrid workplace for all your employees. First, let's try reimagining the IT asset ownership and provisioning to fit the hybrid model. Employees will need IT assets to get their job done. This is true regardless of the employee's work mode. Consider the needs of employees that cannot come into the office regularly and adapt practices like shipping physical assets to employee homes and over the air deployment of software assets to employee devices. The first step in adopting a truly inclusive IT asset provisioning process is to have data on employee locations. Run a survey to your employees and understand the different work modes, that is, fully remote, hybrid, and fully in office that your employees prefer. Make sure you get their locations as well so that you can set up shipping for areas where most of your workers reside. You can use reports like this to get the results of your survey. Here you can see that most of the employees live in the state of California. This means we can set up shipping to California to cover most of them. We also have employees living in Texas. I want to understand where our employees live in Texas. So I'm going to drill down on this report and find that out. I'm going to select drill down by and select city to understand where our employees live in the state of Texas. I can see here that all of our employees live in Austin. Let's go back. There are also a few people living in states of Utah and Nevada. Since there are hardly any other employees here, you can work out shipping plans on a case by case basis with these outliers. Here is another report that shows the percentage of workers working remotely and the percentage of workers that are working out of the office regularly for each city. Again, this report has been built using data collected by surveying employees. This can help you plan your logistics as well. If most of your workers are coming into the office, you don't really have to set up shipping, they can collect their IT hardware themselves. Another inclusive IT practice would be to prepare to support a wide range of infrastructure. In hybrid workplaces, employees have increasingly started to use their own equipment to get work done. From network infrastructures like routers and switches, and their own device peripherals like keyboards and mice, these devices could range from cheap utilitarian ones to expensive ones with the latest features based on what the employee has invested. While IT teams can issue guidelines on do's and don'ts for employees to follow when buying new networking hardware, you can't really control the hardware that your employees will buy and use. The best way to ensure that your network security isn't compromised and your employees don't feel compelled to use more expensive devices is to understand the devices that your employees use and prepare to optimize your network based on those devices. You can run a survey to understand the different endpoints and devices that your employees use to connect to your network. Ensure that you capture vendor information for your workers' devices as well. I'll show you how this can be useful in a bit. Here is a report that shows you this data. Here you can see different devices that your employees are using. I'm going to see the vendors that our employees buy routers from. To see that, I'm going to drill down on this column, drill down by vendor. As you can see here, all of our employees are using routers from TP-Link, Netgear, and Linksys. You can use this information to optimize your security for these vendors. You can also potentially reach out to them to start a corporate relationship that could be beneficial for everyone involved. You can do this for other devices as well. Lastly, let's be accommodative of different work styles by following flexible access to company resources. Hybrid workers face unique challenges when they aren't working from the office. Some may have kids that need attention or have ailing relatives that they need to take care of. There could also be employees who prefer to work at certain times in the day as they try to weave together their personal and professional lives to achieve work life balance. It is in the best interest of the IT team to enable flexible access of company resources to employees instead of restricting them by the time of day. IT also needs to provide tech support for greater portions of the day. However, do this with caution, as you will also have to start constantly monitoring the network throughout the day to avoid unauthorized access and data breaches. Here is a report that shows VPN access patterns of employees. While plenty of access does occur during the business hours of 9 to 5, there is also a lot of access happening during non business hours as well. A report like this can help you decide when to allow or restrict access to company resources. While employees may like the flexibility in access, the onus is on the IT team to ensure the flexibility doesn't come at the cost of decreased security. Speaking of security, let's dive into the next step. We're going to see how you can secure your organization with zero trust. Cybersecurity is one of the pivotal aspects of IT management. With the onset of the pandemic, organizations have been facing an increasing number of security breaches and incidents. The FBI reported a 300% increase in cybersecurity incidents since the start of the pandemic in the US alone. A similar trend is observed across the world as well. An estimated 77% of organizations do not have a concrete incident response plan. It was hard enough to secure the network when most of the workforce worked from the office, but now that we are moving towards a hybrid workplace with a part of the workforce working remotely and a part returning to the office, it is even more challenging to secure the networks from breaches fully. A reliable way to achieve good security would be to implement zero trust in your organization. Zero trust is a concept where organizations should not automatically trust anything inside or outside of their network perimeters. Instead, they must verify everything that tries to connect to their systems. The motto is trust nothing, verify everything. Zero trust is implemented with the combination of multi factor authentication, IAM encryption, analytics, and governance policies where users are given the least amount of access to accomplish any task. Organizations that employ zero trust are observed to be much more resilient to cybercrime and data breaches. With zero trust, you can allow single sign on, implement access control policies, access proxy, perform user and device based authentication and authorization. Using analytics, you can assign vulnerability scores to your assets and employ stricter modes of authentication for assets that are deemed vulnerable. You can do this using the asset vulnerability score. It is a measure of how vulnerable an asset is to internal or external threats. For example, let's say an iPhone is non compliant with password policies and has a prohibited app installed in it, which means it has two vulnerabilities. So its asset vulnerability score is 2. Let's say there's another device, a Windows laptop, that is missing about 7 critical security patches. It is using 3 outdated software and it also lacks encryption. All that adds up to 11 vulnerabilities. So its asset vulnerability score will be 11. This means that the laptop is at a greater risk of exposure to threats. It's also more exploitable. So the laptop needs to be secured first. Asset vulnerability can be customized to give greater score to certain critical vulnerabilities. For example, if an organization wants to attach higher weightage to missed security patches and lesser weightage to prohibited software installations, you can set up such variations using analytics. Here's how you can visualize the asset vulnerability score. This report gives you the vulnerability scores of various assets in use. Let's set the ownership filter to corporate to filter only the corporate owned devices. I'm also going to set the location to Austin. You can see that in Austin, among the corporate owned devices, there is an iPhone with an asset vulnerability score of 13. Naturally, the bigger the bubble, the bigger is that particular device's vulnerability score. This means that the device is highly vulnerable and exploitable and it needs to be secured immediately. Hover over the top of the bubble, like I'm doing right now, to see more details. You can also filter out results for corporate or personal devices using the user filter at the top of the report. You can use the location filter to see vulnerable assets in other locations as well. The purpose of this report is to quantify the vulnerability of assets in an organization. This can help IT teams prioritize assets that are most vulnerable and remedy them first. Besides assigning vulnerability scores to assets, you can assign risk scores for your users as well. Because any network is only as secure as the people accessing it and using it. Around 20% of the security breaches have been found to have been caused by remote workers. Here is an example of how you can assign risk values to your employees. For example, a sales executive who constantly travels for work will connect to many wireless networks in places like airports and coffee shops. These networks may be vulnerable, and this leaves the executive's devices prone to attack. Employees like this can be marked as high risk. Another example would be C suite employees who have access to highly sensitive and confidential data. A breach in their devices would be disastrous for the entire organization. They can also be marked as high risk. Classifying your workforce into risk levels will ensure that the highest levels of security are applied to the parts of the workforce that have the highest risk associated with them. This also helps you enforce strict access regulations wherever it is possible. This ensures that even in the event of a breach, the data exfiltrated is minimal. Let's create a report that shows the segmentation of the workforce by their risk. Here is the users table from the Services Plus and Desktop Central data blending. I've added another column here to this table, which captures the risk scores that I've assigned to these users. Let's see how we can use this table to create our report. Click Create Chart View. This is the Analytics Plus report builder screen. You can drag and drop columns into this area to create reports. I'm going to drop the username column into the x-axis. I'm also going to drop the vulnerability scores column into the y-axis. Since I want a bubble chart like the chart that we saw earlier, I'm going to drop the vulnerability scores column into the size as well. Okay, this gives us a bubble chart. I want the vulnerability scores to be more obvious visually. So I'm going to put the vulnerability scores column into color and text. Now I'm going to sort this report by y-axis descending. These are the people that have the highest risk scores in your organization. Now you can use this report to set risk profiles and also policies for these high risk people. I'm going to save this report and call it employees and their vulnerability scores. Moving on, let's talk about preparing your infrastructure for increased cloud adoption. Cloud adoption has always been on the rise. 3 years before the pandemic, organizations were moving to the cloud at the rate of 28 to 34%, according to a McKinsey survey. In the past year, this rate has been at 55%, and it is not just in America. This rapid adoption has been consistent across the Asia Pacific, Europe, and other regions as well. While traditional IT has had most of its applications and tools hosted on premises, the new cloud centric move has had on premise server based applications moving to the cloud infrastructure. The responsibility of hardware management now goes to the cloud vendor. This makes infrastructure as a service and software as a service vendors a major component of the IT delivery process. This does not in any way mean that the cloud will make IT departments obsolete. Don't worry, guys, no one's out of a job yet. However, it will introduce new and interesting challenges to the help desk. Let's take a look at three of those challenges, starting with the shift in the IT workload. IT teams are seeing a shift in their workload from maintaining in house hardware and related equipment to a more cloud focused workload. They are asked to set up and maintain workflows in cloud applications, secure and manage company data, and act as a cloud facilitator to ensure operations run smoothly. This shift gets more apparent with better cloud adoption. Here is a report that shows this shift. You can mark out requests under tags like cloud management, hardware related, network related, and so on to create a report like this. Let's filter out all the categories but hardware and cloud management and see how they measure up. As you can see here, the workload that is hardware related has significantly gone down over time, and the workload related to cloud management has gone up. As cloud adoption goes up, you will see this trend pick up. In addition to the shift in workload, you will also see changes in the kind of IT requests that you get. This leads us to the next challenge: new varieties of IT requests. With cloud adoption on the rise, there is a shift in the type of requests that IT teams will receive. For example, they will receive fewer and fewer requests to troubleshoot installed applications on users' machines. Instead, they will be focusing on configuring and managing organization accounts of business applications. This is why we see a lot more change management and configuration management requests come to the help desk. Having visibility into the type of requests that come into the help desk will help leaders plan resource management better and equip the IT team with the necessary tools. This report shows the phenomenon that I've been talking about. As you can see here, I'm splitting the requests by category to assess the shifts in the volume of requests in these categories. You can see the percentage of change management and asset management and configuration requests is much higher than traditional requests like incidents. This leads us to the next point: initiating a change in the focus of KPIs that you've been using. In traditional IT, critical KPIs for the help desk used to be SLAs, response time, and resolution time. But now, the focus is on ensuring a smooth transition to the cloud with minimal disruption to the business. For this, you can track infrastructure KPIs like CPU utilization, disk utilization, and memory utilization. You can also track application metrics like availability, response time, and latency. These metrics should give you a fairly good idea of your user's experience. By measuring and tracking these metrics, you can start trying to improve them. First, let's take a look at the infrastructure KPIs. Here we can see the CPU utilization, disk utilization, and memory utilization. An increase in all of these metrics indicates that your cloud infrastructure is under a higher load. It is good practice to investigate if there is any unexpected utilization of CPU, disk, or memory. By tracking these KPIs, you can understand your cloud usage better and plan for the future. Here is a report that shows your availability. The availability metric shows the amount of time that your cloud services are available for you to use. This needs to be as high as possible to ensure there is no business disruption. Here is a report that shows your application response time. If you have a high response time, your application will start feeling sluggish to use. You can also configure a threshold for this report. Set the average response time as the threshold like I've done here, so you can see if the current response time is more or less than the average response time. This is a report that shows your network latency. Latency is the delay between your action and the web application's response to the action. It can also be called the round trip time. If latency increases, the application's performance will suffer. Keeping track of the latency will ensure your business users get the best application performance at any point in time. A modern IT helpdesk manager's dashboard should look something like this. This dashboard tracks all the new KPIs and reports that we discussed. Keeping all of these metrics and reports in one location helps you stay on top. With the rapid move to the cloud, the IT service desk teams are now in a position to support business users who are running services on hardware that the corporate IT team doesn't have any control over. But with a reduced workload from no longer having to support typical incidents, IT teams can finally don the cap of cloud service providers. Now that we've seen the need to be prepared for increased cloud adoption, let's move on to the next step. You should shift your IT spending in order to align it with the hybrid workplace. The impact of the move to the cloud is not just on the type of request raised, but also on IT spending. As an organization moves from hosting applications on premises to the cloud, there's a marked reduction in hardware expenses. Most organizations find that having cloud based infrastructure reduces IT spending. This shift in spending can be seen here. Track your IT expenses and tag them under hardware expenses, software expenses, labor costs, etc. You can see that there's a marked decrease in hardware related spending, and we are seeing software related expenses and cloud infrastructure costs go up. As cloud adoption in your organization increases, you will see this trend pick up. Another benefit from the movement to the cloud is that basic requests, which tend to form the majority of the requests, are now hyped off to cloud vendors or application vendors. This allows the IT department to run a specialized team that no longer needs to field basic requests. This has the potential to cut down IT spending significantly. As IT teams become more specialized, they have the time and ability to solve complex problems that require a specialist touch. Problems that have been a part of your employees' lives will now be solved. IT teams now have the time to tweak and improve existing processes and tackle complex issues faced by the workforce. Specialized IT teams contribute to improvements in an organization's productivity and efficiency. This, along with the increasing adoption of workflow automation, no code platforms, and remote monitoring, improves employee productivity significantly. Here are a couple of reports that show this. This report tracks the costs of labor against revenue. As you can see here, the cost of labor is decreasing with time while revenue is increasing. I'm using a combo chart here to track these two metrics together. In addition to tracking labor costs against revenue, let's take a look at labor costs against throughput. Now, what is throughput? Here I'm measuring throughput as the revenue earned per employee. Again, we see a similar trend where the cost of labor is decreasing with time and the revenue per employee is growing. We have come to the last step of today's session, and that is to improve service delivery continuously. While IT teams strive to adapt to the hybrid workplace, it is important to remember that even though the mode of work has changed, the value and impact IT has on the business is still the same. The business objectives haven't changed either. It is vital for IT teams to ensure that their service delivery is continuously improving despite the changes in the work environment. A good way to do that is by measuring IT metrics that have high business impact and compare their pre pandemic and current levels. Here are some metrics that you can measure. This chart shows the current and pre pandemic SLA compliance levels. As you can see here, the SLA compliance has slipped in the months since the pandemic hit, and this is something that we should be working on. This report shows the current and pre pandemic backlog levels. We can see a slight increase in the current backlog levels compared to the pre-pandemic data. This is also another area of improvement. We have a report here that shows the CSAT or customer satisfaction score for the help desk. We can see here that the current CSAT scores have gone down during June and July but have picked up since then. This is a positive trend and we need to keep this momentum going. Lastly, here is a report that shows the major incidents that were raised to the service desk. As you can see here, there aren't any significant increases or decreases in the major incident count. This is also a metric that we can take up for improvement as a part of our continuous improvement efforts. Besides tracking these metrics separately, you can also add them to a single continuous improvement dashboard to keep track of them all in one place. Here is a continuous improvement dashboard created with the reports that we saw just now. You can modify this dashboard to fit your organization's needs as well. As you adapt to the hybrid workplace, here are some techniques that you can use to improve your service delivery. Let's start with implementing robust project management to ensure outcomes. Project management is an integral part of any service desk, more so in a hybrid workplace. Ensure you have set up a simple yet robust project management system that works for you and your team. This will help you track important tasks and stay on top of the network that needs to be done. A robust project management system will keep all your team members in the loop, telling them what their individual and collective responsibilities are and their progress in completing their tasks. This will also give you a bird's eye view of the service desk. A project management system goes hand in hand with IT success in a hybrid environment. Service Desk Plus offers a comprehensive project management module that you can use. Now that you have a project management process going, let's look at the next technique using automation to free up your technicians from repetitive processes. It has become the norm to fear automation and its capabilities of moving work from people to machines. While some of the fear is warranted, robots aren't going to take over the world just yet. Automation can be leveraged to take over mundane, repetitive tasks and free up your technician to use their skills to solve complex problems. Find tasks in your service delivery process that are repetitive, require little to no attention to perform, need to be done in a regular cadence, and start automating them. As you continue automating these tasks, encourage your technicians to use the extra time on their hands to tackle long-term complex problems at your help desk. They will appreciate the opportunity to apply their skills to meaningful problems, and you will also boost productivity and solve complex problems along the way as well. You've set up robust project management, automated repeated processes. What else can you do? Start by setting up a detailed documentation for your workers to consume. In any service desk, the technicians will be running operations across multiple time zones and geographies. The hybrid model has added another variable into the mix by adding multiple work modes as well. All these add to the technician's workload. A way to alleviate their workload would be to document issues and their solutions extensively and make it available in a knowledge base accessible to your workforce. This cuts down the technician's effort in having to resolve issues that have occurred before and those that have documented solutions. As your workforce learns to use the knowledge base more, they will develop the habit of looking up solutions for their issues even before raising any requests. Over time, this will decrease the number of requests that your service desk receives, and your technicians can focus on more critical and complex requests and let your workforce solve the basic stuff themselves. With this, we've come to the end of what I wanted to talk to you about today. Let's quickly summarize. We've seen how you can take existing IT practices and adapt them to make them more inclusive in the hybrid workplace, utilize zero trust concepts and effectively secure your organization, use analytics to prepare for the movement to the cloud, shift IT spending and make it aligned to running a highly specialized IT team, establish continuous improvement culture by comparing current and past performance. The reports and dashboards that I've shown you today were built using Analytics Plus, Manage Engine's IT analytics solution. Analytics Plus integrates out of the box with Service Desk Plus and other Manage Engine applications like Desktop Central, Patch Manager Plus, Mobile Device Manager Plus, App Manager, Applications Manager, and also other IT applications like ServiceNow, Jira, and Zendesk. If you have an application that isn't on this list, let me know in the chat and we'll reach out to you to help you set up the integration with the APIs. Analytics Plus comes with over 200 plus out of the box reports and dashboards for Service Desk Plus. It makes use of AI to offer analytics for your help desk. It allows you to perform both historical and predictive analysis. It blends data between Service Desk Plus and Desktop Center. It also allows you to share and collaborate with colleagues. If you're interested in trying Analytics Plus, you can download a free 30-day trial. Just scan the QR code on your screen to download and install the application. We also have a free ebook called Back to Work and IT Admin's Guide for you to download. This ebook dives deep into how IT teams can resettle employees coming back to work now that governments around the world have started to ease restrictions. Thank you for taking the time to attend the session today. I hope you found the session helpful. If you have any other questions or if you're interested in learning more about how advanced analytics can help your IT team, write to me at the email on your screen. Thank you and have a nice day.